Imagine a world consumed by war. A world where the very air you breathe is thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder, and the ground beneath your feet trembles with the relentless pounding of artillery shells. This is not a distant nightmare, but a stark reality that millions faced during the First World War. A world of trenches, mud, and barbed wire. Soldiers lived in these trenches for months on end, enduring the harshest of conditions. The mud was not just a nuisance, it was a constant, life-threatening hazard. It swallowed men and equipment alike, turning the battlefield into a quagmire of despair. Machine guns roar, spitting fire and death. These weapons of war were merciless, mowing down waves of soldiers with ruthless efficiency. The relentless chatter of machine gun fire became the soundtrack of the battlefield, a grim reminder of the industrial scale of the slaughter. Soldiers charge, only to be met by a storm of bullets. No man's land, the desolate expanse between opposing trenches, became a graveyard for countless men. Each charge was a desperate gamble, a race against death itself, with the odds stacked heavily against survival. The air is thick with smoke, the stench of cordite and the cries of the wounded. The battlefield was a hellscape where the injured lay in agony, waiting for help that might never come. The medics, brave souls themselves, risked their lives to pull the wounded from the jaws of death. This was the grim reality of the First World War, a conflict that would forever alter the course of human history. It was a war that introduced the world to the horrors of modern, mechanized combat and left an indelible mark on the collective consciousness of humanity. This Great War, as it was initially known, erupted in the heart of Europe, its roots tangled in a web of alliances, imperial ambitions and simmering nationalist tensions. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the spark that ignited this volatile mix, setting off a chain reaction that would engulf the world in conflict. What began as a seemingly distant regional conflict in the Balkans quickly escalated into a global conflagration, drawing in the world's great powers and forever changing the political and social landscape of the 20th century. The war's legacy is still felt today, a somber reminder of the devastating cost of human conflict. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife Sophie in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914, provided the catalyst for this global catastrophe. A Serbian nationalist, Gavrilo Princip, fired the fatal shots, igniting a diplomatic firestorm that rapidly spread across Europe. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, issued an ultimatum to Serbia, demanding satisfaction for the assassination. When Serbia failed to meet all of the demands, Austria-Hungary declared war on July 28, 1914. Within days, a complex web of alliances drew the great powers of Europe into the conflict. Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia on August 1, 1914, and on France 2 days later. Germany's invasion of neutral Belgium on August 4th brought Great Britain into the war. The Western Front quickly devolved into a bloody stalemate, characterized by trench warfare and horrific casualties. From the North Sea to the Swiss border, a labyrinth of trenches fortified by machine guns and artillery stretched for hundreds of miles. On the Eastern Front, a more fluid but equally brutal conflict raged between Germany and Austria-Hungary against Russia. The war was not confined to the battlefields of Europe. It was a truly global conflict, involving nations and colonies from every corner of the world. The vast empires of the warring powers ensured that the conflict spread to Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. In these regions, soldiers faced harsh and unfamiliar terrains, from the scorching deserts of the Middle East to the dense jungles of Asia and the rugged landscapes of Africa. Each front presented its own unique challenges and horrors, adding to the complexity and scale of the war. The involvement of colonial troops was significant. These soldiers, often from far-flung parts of the empires, were brought into the fray, fighting in lands far from their homes. They played crucial roles in various campaigns, demonstrating bravery and resilience despite the harsh conditions and the often limited recognition they received for their efforts. The war's reach extended beyond the traditional European powers, drawing in people from diverse backgrounds and cultures, all united by the common cause of their respective empires. In 1915, British and French forces launched a disastrous campaign at Gallipoli, seeking to capture the Dardanelles Strait and knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war. The Gallipoli campaign was marked by fierce fighting and heavy casualties on both sides. The rugged terrain and strong Ottoman defences made the Allied landings extremely difficult. Despite their best efforts, the Allies were unable to secure a decisive victory, and the campaign ultimately ended in a costly failure. The Gallipoli campaign remains one of the most infamous episodes of World War I, symbolizing the futility and tragedy of the conflict. At sea, German U-boats waged unrestricted submarine warfare, targeting Allied shipping in an attempt to strangle Britain's supply lines. The U-boat campaign was a significant aspect of the naval war as these stealthy submarines prowled the Atlantic, sinking merchant ships and warships alike. The threat of U-boat attacks created a constant state of tension and danger for those at sea. The Allies responded with various countermeasures, including convoys and anti-submarine warfare tactics, but the U-boat menace remained a formidable challenge throughout the war. The sinking of the Lusitania in May 1915, with the loss of over 1,000 lives, including 128 Americans, outraged public opinion in the United States and drew America closer to war. The Lusitania, a British ocean liner, was torpedoed by a German U-boat off the coast of Ireland. The attack on a civilian vessel carrying passengers and non-combatants was seen as a blatant act of aggression and a violation of international law. The incident fueled anti-German sentiment and increased calls for the United States to join the conflict. The sinking of the Lusitania became a rallying point for those advocating for American intervention, highlighting the global stakes of the war and the need for a decisive response. 1917 proved to be a turning point in the war. The entry of the United States into the conflict on the side of the Allies in April 1917, coupled with the collapse of the Russian Empire following the Bolshevik Revolution, dramatically shifted the balance of power. The arrival of fresh American troops and resources on the Western Front boosted Allied morale and provided a much-needed advantage in the face of German offensives. By 1918, Germany and its allies were nearing exhaustion. The Allied forces, bolstered by American manpower and resources, launched a series of successful offensives, pushing the Germans back. On November 11, 1918, Germany signed the Armistice of Compiègne, ending the hostilities. The war had come at a staggering cost. Millions lay dead, empires had crumbled, and Europe was left devastated, both physically and psychologically. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, officially ended the war but failed to address the underlying causes of the conflict. Germany, blamed for the war and burdened with crippling reparations, felt humiliated and resentful. The Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman and Russian empires had been swept away, replaced by a patchwork of new nations with their own national aspirations and rivalries. The seeds of future conflict had been sown. The First World War left an indelible mark on the world. It shattered the illusion of progress and enlightenment that had characterized the 19th century, ushering in an era of uncertainty and disillusionment. The war also accelerated social and technological changes, from the emancipation of women to the rise of mass media and the development of new technologies, both destructive and transformative. The First World War stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict and the fragility of peace. It was a conflict that engulfed nations, drawing millions into its devastating grasp. The war, which was supposed to end all wars, instead set the stage for further global conflicts and left an indelible mark on the 20th century. The trenches, the battles, and the sheer scale of the destruction are etched into our collective memory, serving as a somber testament to the horrors of war. It is a story of courage and sacrifice, of loss and devastation, and of the enduring power of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. The soldiers who fought in the trenches displayed remarkable bravery, often facing insurmountable odds. Their stories of heroism and resilience continue to inspire us today. The medics and nurses who tended to the wounded, often under fire, showed incredible compassion and dedication. The war also saw the involvement of countless civilians whose lives were irrevocably changed by the conflict. Their contributions, though often overlooked, were vital to the war effort. As we reflect on the centenary of this cataclysmic event, let us remember the millions who perished and the countless lives forever altered by the Great War. The cemeteries and memorials scattered across Europe and beyond are poignant reminders of the scale of the loss. Each grave, each name etched in stone represents a life cut short, a family left to grieve. The ceremonies of remembrance, with their solemn rituals and symbols, help us to honor those who gave their lives and to ensure that their sacrifices are not forgotten. Let us strive to learn from the mistakes of the past and work towards a future where dialogue and diplomacy prevail over violence and destruction. The lessons of the First World War are as relevant today as they were a century ago. The importance of international cooperation, the need for effective conflict resolution, and the value of human life are principles that must guide our actions. By fostering understanding and promoting peace, we can build a world where such a devastating conflict never happens again. For in the words of the poet Wilfred Owen, my subject is war and the pity of war. Owen's poetry captures the futility and horror of the conflict, giving voice to the experiences of those who lived through it. His words remind us of the human cost of war and the need to remember those who suffered. The letters and poems written by soldiers in the trenches provide a poignant insight into their thoughts and feelings, offering a personal perspective on the war that is often missing from historical accounts. The poetry is in the pity. Let us never forget. As we lay poppies on the graves and stand in silence at the memorials, we are reminded of the sacrifices made and the lives lost. These acts of remembrance are not just about honoring the past, but also about committing to a future where such sacrifices are no longer necessary. Let us carry forward the lessons of the Great War, striving for a world where peace and understanding prevail.